What if everything we think we know about how cities and civilizations began is wrong? What if cities, technology, and laws didn't start in Mesopotamia or Egypt, but in a world that doesn't exist anymore? An empire that was swallowed by the ocean. Atlantis. This name has been whispered for 2,000 years. Most people say it's just a made-up story, but a Greek philosopher named Plato described it with amazing details. Imagine an island bigger than whole continents. Canals cut like veins through circular rings. Temples covered in metals brighter than gold. Fleets of ships ruling oceans that weren't even on maps yet. And then, in just one night and one day, all of it disappeared. It was erased not only from the earth, but from history's memory itself. Could Atlantis have been a lost super-civilization that gave the world pieces of its brilliance? And if it was real, how much of our history is actually theirs? Stay with me as we explore this possibility, a place where geology, myth, and archaeology come together. The sea keeps its secrets, but the story still speaks. Together, we'll follow its trail into the depths, to see if Atlantis was just a warning or the forgotten foundation of human history. The sea has always carried voices. Stand by the shore on a quiet evening and you might hear it. The hiss of foam against rock, the sigh of waves pulling back into darkness. A rhythm so much like breathing that it feels alive. For thousands of years, sailors, poets, and dreamers have all said the same thing. The ocean speaks. Its language is memory, its words are loss, and sometimes its whispers form stories so strong that they refuse to die. One such whisper carries a name that still sparkles in our imagination: Atlantis. Plato, the Greek philosopher, was the first to write that name down more than 2,000 years ago. In his writings called Timaeus and Critias, he describes a world both beautiful and tragic. He doesn't present it only as a myth, but as a story passed down through generations. According to him, Atlantis was a powerful island empire lying beyond the Pillars of Hercules, where the Mediterranean Sea spilled into the huge Atlantic Ocean. It was larger than Libya and Asia Minor combined, richer than any empire, and blessed with abundance. And yet, in a single day and night it vanished into the sea, leaving behind only a tale. The story, Plato claimed, didn't come from his own imagination. He said it was preserved by Egyptian priests in the city of Sais, recorded in their ancient temple records. They told it to Solon, a respected Athenian lawmaker, who brought the tale back to Greece. Solon's descendants passed it down until it reached Plato's ancestor Critias, and finally, Plato himself. In this telling, the myth of Atlantis is not just a separate fable, but a thread stretching back through centuries of memory. Memory rooted in Egypt, a land famous for preserving history longer than most civilizations have lived. What makes Plato's account remarkable is how precise it is. He gives us numbers and measurements: canals 50 stadia long, plains 2,000 by 3,000 stadia, temples covered with precious metals. He describes circular rings of land and water, bridges crossing moats, watchtowers and gates, harbors filled with fleets. He names orichalcum, a metal more brilliant than gold, and describes a huge statue of Poseidon in a temple lined with silver, gold, and bronze. Such detail feels unusual for a story with a lesson. It reads less like a metaphor and more like a blueprint. Why would a philosopher, known for stories with lessons like the cave and the ring of Gyges, spend so much time on engineering details if he didn't believe or want us to believe that Atlantis was real? Scholars argue over his purpose. Some say Atlantis was simply a moral story, a warning against pride, contrasting Athens' virtue with a greedy empire that fell. But others notice how his descriptions echo known realities. The sudden destruction of Minoan civilization on Crete after the eruption of Thera, for instance, feels eerily close to his story. That eruption around 1600 BCE devastated the Aegean with fire, ash, and tsunamis. At Akrotiri, paintings of fleets and harbors were buried under pumice, preserved like Pompeii. The memory of that disaster could easily have been woven into Egyptian records, later reaching Plato as Atlantis. Yet Plato placed Atlantis's fall far deeper in time, 9,000 years before Athens, around 9600 BCE. That date takes us to the end of the Ice Age, a period when seas rose by more than 100 meters, drowning vast coastlines. Imagine villages swallowed, fertile plains turned to bays, islands lost to waves. In places like Doggerland in northern Europe, whole landscapes where humans once lived are now seafloor. Geological evidence confirms catastrophic floods, such as the outburst from glacial Lake Agassiz, that transformed continents. Could Atlantis be one of those drowned lands, preserved in distorted memory? The Egyptians themselves preserved flood myths. Their priests spoke of cycles of destruction, by water and fire, eras erased before new dynasties began. In this, they echoed a global pattern. Nearly every culture carries a flood story: the Mesopotamian tale of Utnapishtim, the biblical Noah, the Hindu Manu, the Hopi's survival through the ant people. The universality suggests a deep ancient trauma, remembered and reshaped across generations. Atlantis fits within this chorus, not as the only drowned world, but as the most detailed, the one named with a capital city and a lineage of kings. Imagine it, a city of rings, gleaming with red, white, and black stone, ships gliding through canals, golden statues shimmering at sunset. Then imagine silence, the sudden darkness of waves closing overhead, the land shuddering under earthquakes, the sea reclaiming its own. Survivors, if there were any, would have fled across the waters, carrying fragments of memory. They may have told stories that grew with each retelling. A paradise lost, a warning, a dream. By the time it reached Plato, fact and legend may already have entwined, leaving us with a story at once believable and impossible. But absence is its own mystery. Where are the ruins, the artifacts, the inscriptions beyond Plato's words? Archaeologists have searched the Aegean, the Atlantic coasts, and the Sahara's edges, finding hints but no proof. Yet perhaps that is why Atlantis endures. If ruins lay bare beneath shallow seas, the mystery would fade. Instead, its silence is complete. That silence invites us to imagine, to listen to the waves, and wonder what lies beneath. The whisper of Atlantis is more than curiosity. It is a mirror reflecting our own fears and hopes. It asks whether our civilizations too could vanish in a night, whether our knowledge too could fold into silence. It challenges us to see that greatness is fragile, that memory is easily lost, and it tempts us with the possibility that somewhere still, a clue waits, a pillar, a wall, a name carved in stone beneath the sea. This is where our journey begins. From Plato's words, from Egyptian memory, from the ocean's whisper, we follow the current outward. We will search in volcanic islands, in desert spirals, in ruins reclaimed by jungle. We will weigh geology against myth, archaeology against imagination. And always we will listen to the silence, for in silence, the story still speaks. Atlantis is not just a lost city. It is the question that refuses to sink. Picture yourself walking into a city designed not randomly, not with the slow growth of centuries, but as though drawn first on a cosmic canvas and then built in stone. That is the impression Plato gives us when he describes the capital of Atlantis. He doesn't merely say it was large or beautiful. He sketches it in precise geometry, circular rings of land and sea, alternating bands carved by canals, 3 of water and 2 of earth, all surrounded by walls that gleamed with metals unknown to his audience. It is not allegory, but blueprint. The city's layout begins at the center, a sacred island surrounded by the first ring of water. From there, bridges spanned outward, connecting each band like spokes on a wheel. Ships glided through canals that widened into harbors guarded by gates and towers. Tunnels ran beneath bridges so that vessels could pass without breaking the surface harmony. Plato even gives us measurements, the outer ring large enough to harbor 1,000 ships. The canals wide enough for triremes to pass two abreast. The design is so specific that architects have attempted reconstructions on paper, sketching a city of precision that feels surprisingly modern. At its heart stood the great temple of Poseidon, the god said to be father of Atlantis's kings. Plato tells us it was vast, its exterior lined with silver, its interior plated with gold, its roof crowned with orichalcum, a metal now lost to us, shimmering red as fire. Within, a statue of Poseidon towered, driving a chariot drawn by winged horses, surrounded by the 10 kings descended from him. Imagine entering such a place, a gleam of fire-colored walls, the reflection of gold in pools of water, the echo of hymns beneath the ceiling alive with flickering torchlight. It was not just architecture, but theater, a space where divine lineage became tangible in stone and metal. Orichalcum itself has drawn fascination for centuries. Was it a real alloy? Perhaps copper mixed with zinc, like the ingots recovered from a shipwreck off Sicily in 2015. Those lumps of golden red metal, tested and confirmed by modern science, bear Plato's word into reality. If so, then Atlantis's builders were master metallurgists, working not only with bronze and tin, but with rare alloys that symbolized power. To coat walls and columns with such metal was more than decoration. It was a declaration that their city was unlike any other. The blueprint extended beyond grandeur. Plato describes a vast plain surrounding the capital, divided into 10,000 plots, crisscrossed by canals straight as arrows, each 100 feet wide. Crops thrived in the fertile soil, watered by rivers that flowed from mountains rich in timber and stone. Imagine flying over it as if in a dream and seeing a grid etched into the earth, each canal reflecting sunlight, each field glowing with green abundance. This was no chaotic sprawl, but a system planned, measured, controlled. The city was the heart, and the plain its body, pulsing with lifeblood carried by water. If we look to real history, the echoes are uncanny. The Indus Valley civilization built Mohenjo-Daro with streets laid out in precise grids, covered drains, and reservoirs. The Maya cut causeways that ran straight for miles through jungle. In Egypt, the pyramids aligned to stars with mathematical rigor. In each case, ancient builders displayed a grasp of order far beyond what we expect of their time. Atlantis, in Plato's words, surpasses them all, a culmination, or perhaps an origin, of this impulse to build not just shelters, but cosmic diagrams in stone. The city was not only functional, but dazzling. The outermost walls, according to Plato, were clad in brass, reflecting sunlight like fire at dawn. The next ring was covered in tin, pale and gleaming under moonlight. The innermost walls shone with orichalcum, glowing with an otherworldly hue. To approach the harbor would have been to enter a vision. 3 circles of light, red and gold and silver, encircling temples, gardens, and palaces. It was a city designed to inspire awe, not only in neighbors, but in the gods themselves. Inside the walls lay spaces of leisure and culture, gymnasiums, parks, and sacred groves. Plato speaks of horse racing tracks encircling the city, of harbors filled with merchants from distant lands, the noise of markets, the chants of priests, the splash of oars. Atlantis, if it existed, would have been a metropolis alive with sound and color. The blueprint even extended into ritual. Every 5 or 6 years, the 10 kings gathered in Poseidon's temple, swearing oaths on the laws engraved in orichalcum. Bulls were sacrificed, their blood poured into a basin, and judgments were made by fire and water. The architecture framed the ceremony. Rings of stone enfolding kings as though the city itself bore witness to their vows. Governance and sacred duty fused, anchored in design, and yet within this perfect plan lies a shadow. Plato hints that such abundance, such brilliance, carried seeds of downfall. The very symmetry of the city may have symbolized a harmony that could not endure once greed entered. The gleaming metals, the vast fleets, the ordered plains, all of it, he suggests, became too much, too proud. The blueprint of a golden city is also the blueprint of its eventual hubris. Still, the image is haunting. No other ancient story gives us such detail. Troy was remembered for its walls, Babylon for its gardens, but only Atlantis is drawn like a map. Rings, canals, temples, metals. To read it is to feel that somewhere, on some forgotten shore, such a city might still be buried beneath waves or sands. Why would Plato craft such an elaborate design if it was only a parable? Was he writing down a fragment of memory heard from Egyptian priests, distorted but still rooted in reality? Or did he invent a city so precise that it could outlive his philosophy, creating centuries of searchers who would not let it go? The blueprint remains. In imagination we can still walk its rings, cross its bridges, gaze upon the temple's golden heart, and in that vision lies the hook of the mystery. Atlantis is not simply a city lost. It is a city so clearly drawn that it feels as though it must have been real. As we leave its shining walls behind, the question grows larger. How could such a place vanish in a single day and night, swallowed by water and earth? The blueprint of glory demands a blueprint of destruction. And it is to that sudden silence we must now turn. There is a phrase in Plato's telling of Atlantis that lingers like a thunderclap across history. In a single day and night of misfortune. With those words, an empire of golden walls and circular canals ceased to exist, pulled into the depths, leaving nothing but silence. The abruptness is what chills us. Civilizations usually decline in slow arcs. Famine creeping over decades, politics eroding stability, generations forgetting skills. But here was no gradual decline. Here was a curtain drop, swift and absolute. Could such a thing truly happen? History and geology both answer yes. The Earth carries scars of sudden disasters that remade worlds in days. The eruption of Thera, modern Santorini, is one of the most dramatic examples. Around 1600 BCE, a volcanic mountain tore itself apart in a blast 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa. Columns of ash shot into the sky, darkening the sun across the Aegean. Waves towering higher than city walls slammed into Crete, destroying the Minoan civilization, a maritime empire whose fleets had once ruled the sea. At Acrotiri, paintings of ships and festivals were frozen beneath pumice. Streets, staircases, and vessels remain intact, as if waiting for footsteps that never returned. To the Greeks, who inherited this memory, how could Atlantis not feel possible? A city undone by the sea in a single violent night was no metaphor, but a story already told by their own islands. Look further back, and the Younger Dryas period looms, a climatic convulsion at the end of the Ice Age. Around 12,800 years ago, something jolted the Earth back into glacial cold. In Greenland's ice cores, a line of soot and platinum reveals the fingerprint of catastrophe. Some scientists argue fragments of a disintegrating comet struck the planet, igniting wildfires across continents, plunging skies into darkness, and unleashing torrents as ice dams burst. Sea levels rose, coastlines vanished, and ancient peoples were forced inland. In the black mats of North America, archaeologists find a sudden break, the bones of mammoths burned and buried in charcoal. the world changed in an eye blink. If the Egyptian priests who told Solon about Atlantis preserved echoes of this trauma, then perhaps Plato's day and night was not allegory, but inherited memory. Earthquakes too prove how swiftly ground can swallow the works of centuries. The city of Helike in Greece stood as a prosperous port until 373 BCE. One winter's night, the earth shuddered, waves rose, and by morning, the city was gone, replaced by a lagoon. Historians recorded its fate, and for centuries it was remembered as a Greek Atlantis. Only in recent decades did archaeologists rediscover its ruins, preserved beneath layers of silt. The story is a chilling parallel, a thriving city extinguished in hours, leaving behind whispers and warnings. Even in more recent memory, nature has shown its sudden power. In 1883, Krakatoa's eruption annihilated 2/3 of the island and sent waves across the Indian Ocean that reached South Africa. In 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami struck coastlines from Indonesia to Africa, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives in a matter of hours. What Plato described is not impossible. It is the terrifying pattern of earth and water. And yet Atlantis feels different. Unlike Santorini, Helike, or Pompeii, there are no ruins we can touch. No walls rising from ash, no pottery sealed in mud. Atlantis left only a story. That absence is as haunting as the tale itself. Was it so completely destroyed that nothing remains? Or was it never there at all, crafted by Plato as a mirror for his philosophy? Skeptics lean toward allegory. The Atlanteans grew arrogant, reached for conquest, and were punished, while virtuous Athens endured. It is morality in narrative form, but allegory alone cannot explain the precision of Plato's details, the lengths of canals, the rings of harbors, the gleam of metals. Nor can it dismiss the way so many cultures preserve their own flood tales. From Mesopotamia's Epic of Gilgamesh to the Bible's story of Noah, from India's Nanu guided by a divine fish, to the Hopi people who survived in the care of the ant people, the theme is always the same. Waters rise, worlds drown, humanity resets. Atlantis fits within this chorus, but stands apart for its richness of description. Imagine the moment itself, a night when the ground trembles, temples shatter, and canals overflow their walls. The great fleets break from moorings as waves hurl them inland. Fires ignite, then drown as sea and earth roar together. Priests rush to the temple of Poseidon, their chants lost to thunder. The golden statue gleams one last time in the light of fire before it too is pulled into the abyss. Then silence. By dawn, nothing remains but a boiling sea and the memory of rings where once a city shone. That image is the heartbeat of Atlantis. It is why the story endures, not only because of what was built, but because of how swiftly it ended. It warns us of fragility, that no matter how radiant, civilizations are subject to forces greater than themselves. The lesson resonates still. Our cities rise higher, our ships span oceans, our technologies dazzle. Yet the earth waits, silent but restless. Perhaps this is why Atlantis has never faded. It is not merely a question of whether it existed, but whether it could happen again. A single day, a single night, and the works of millennia may vanish. Atlantis, memory, prophecy, and mirror all at once. And so we turn from the silence of its destruction to the search for its remains. If such a city was erased so swiftly, where might we find its trace? In the Mediterranean's shattered islands, beneath Atlantic waves, or hidden in deserts where water once flowed. The catastrophe sets the stage for the quest that follows. If Atlantis was real, wouldn't its bones lie close to the world Plato knew? Many seekers begin not in the distant Atlantic or the Sahara's sands, but within the familiar basin of the Mediterranean. This was the cradle of Greek memory, the stage of countless myths, and a sea already scarred by floods, quakes, and eruptions. If Plato drew his inspiration from events closer at hand, then perhaps the ruins of Atlantis still rest beneath these waters, folded into the tragedies of Bronze Age collapse. The most persistent candidate is Santorini, ancient Thera. Imagine it as it was before disaster. A circular island crowned by a volcanic mountain, its slopes lined with terraced farms and bustling ports. At Akrotiri, archaeologists uncovered paintings done with a delicacy and confidence unexpected for the 2nd millennium BCE. Scenes of fleets sailing in procession, dolphins leaping in the waves, women adorned with jewelry and elaborate hair. Streets paved with stone, multi-storied homes equipped with drainage, and even indoor plumbing lined avenues bright with murals. It was a city ahead of its time, and then the volcano roared. Around 1600 BCE, Thera's eruption blasted the island apart, leaving the crescent-shaped caldera we see today. Ash rained across the Aegean. Waves struck Crete with devastating force. The Minoan civilization, masters of the sea, never recovered. To later Greeks, this destruction must have seemed like divine punishment. A thriving island power, radiant in art and architecture, erased in days. It is easy to see why Santorini is often equated with Atlantis. The match feels compelling, an advanced maritime culture destroyed by nature. Yet there are problems. Plato places Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the open Atlantic, not within the Mediterranean. His timeline, too, is far older, 9,000 years before Athens, not a mere millennium. Could he have compressed or mistranslated dates? Or did Egyptian priests, from whom Solon learned the tale, speak of multiple catastrophes blended into one story? Far to the west lies another candidate, Tartessos, a wealthy civilization that flourished near the mouth of the Guadalquivir River in Spain. Mentioned by Greek and Roman writers, Tartessos was famed for its silver, tin, and trade. It stood near the threshold of the Atlantic, just beyond the straits. Archaeologists have found traces of settlements and metallurgy, inscriptions in a script still not fully understood. Then, around 500 BCE, Tartessos disappeared from record. Was it absorbed by neighboring powers, undone by flooding, or swallowed by shifting marshes of the Guadalquivir Delta? Some imagine it as a remnant of Atlantis, or even Atlantis itself, remembered not as myth but as history. Malta offers another thread. The island is home to some of the world's oldest megalithic temples, dating back more than 5,000 years. Structures like Huggerquim and Menasdra rise in massive stone blocks aligned with celestial events, older than Stonehenge or the pyramids. Beneath Malta lie subterranean complexes like the Hypogeum of Hull Saflieni, carved with acoustic chambers that can still make the human voice resonate like thunder. Legends speak of catacombs stretching into darkness, of people vanishing within them. Could Malta's ancient builders have preserved fragments of a greater tradition, an echo of Atlantean architects transplanted after catastrophe? And then there is Helike, remembered by Greek historians as the city swallowed by the sea. In 373 BCE, Helike stood as a prosperous city-state in the northern Peloponnese. One winter's night, an earthquake struck. The ground split and a wall of water surged inland. By morning, Helike was gone. Fishermen spoke of ruins visible beneath the waves for centuries. Rediscovered only in the late 20th century, its fate mirrors Atlantis with eerie precision, a flourishing city erased in hours, remembered only as cautionary tale. To Plato's listeners who knew this tragedy, the fall of Atlantis would not have seemed far-fetched. The Mediterranean is crowded with ruins that tell the same story, vibrant cities undone by water and earth. Havlopetri in Greece, submerged beneath shallow waves, is the world's oldest known underwater city, with streets and courtyards still visible. Baiae, near Naples, a resort of Roman elites, sank beneath the sea due to volcanic subsidence. Mosaics still glimmer on its floors under sunlight filtered by water. Each of these places blurs the line between myth and geology, between allegory and archaeology. And yet, none perfectly match Plato's grand design. Santorini offers catastrophe, but not age. Tartessos offers wealth, but not concentric harbors. Malta offers temples, but not empires. Helike offers suddenness, but not scale. Each feels like a fragment of a greater whole, as if Plato's Atlantis was not one place, but a mosaic of memories, disasters, cultures, and ruins blended into a single narrative. This mosaic itself may be the clue. Plato's Egyptian sources may have preserved fragments of multiple catastrophes: the Bronze Age collapse, the fall of the Minoans, the drowning of coasts at the end of the Ice Age. In weaving them together, he created Atlantis, not invented from nothing, but condensed from many truths. Still, the allure of the Mediterranean remains. Its seas are restless, its shores layered with civilizations. Beneath its waves lie cities we have only begun to rediscover. Who can say what waits beneath deeper waters or under sediments yet unexcavated? The Mediterranean may not hold Atlantis itself, but it proves that the sea does not hesitate to take cities, and that stories of drowned worlds are always closer than we think. The trail of Atlantis stretches outward from here, beyond the straits, into the Atlantic itself. If Plato's geography was literal, then the search must follow the open ocean toward lands drowned when the Ice Age ended, toward islands that once stood and then sank, toward mysteries whispered by waves. The Mediterranean gives us fragments. Beyond Gibraltar, perhaps lies the rest. To the Greeks, the Strait of Gibraltar was not just a waterway, it was a threshold. They called it the Pillars of Hercules, a marker where the known world ended and the great Atlantic began. Sailors whispered of monsters, endless seas, and islands that rose and vanished like mirages. Beyond those cliffs of rock lay mystery itself. And it was here, Plato tells us, that Atlantis once stood. An empire beyond the pillars, facing the vast and unknowable ocean. If we follow his words literally, the search moves out of the familiar Mediterranean and into the Atlantic. And here, under the swells of deep water, geologists and explorers have found candidates that tempt us with possibility. One of the most intriguing lies just off the coast of Morocco, the Spartal Bank. Today it is a submerged plateau resting 56 meters beneath the surface. But rewind 12,000 years to the end of the Ice Age, and it may have been dry land. Jacques Collina-Girard, a French geologist, proposed that Spartal could have been the island Plato described. Around 9,600 BCE, when glaciers melted and seas rose, Spartal would have shrunk and then drowned. Earthquake activity in the region could have hastened the collapse, sending waves racing across the strait. The timing aligns uncannily with Plato's date for Atlantis's fall. Imagine it, a fertile island just beyond the straits, its people watching as the sea crept closer each year, until one night the earth shook and the waters claimed it whole. Farther west, the Azores rise like dark green jewels from the Atlantic. Their volcanic peaks are rugged, dramatic, often shrouded in mist. To early sailors, they seemed like remnants of a drowned land, the last high places left above the sea. In the late 1800s, Ignatius Donnelly, whose book Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, fired the modern imagination, argued that the Azores were the mountain tops of Atlantis. Their location matches Plato's geography, far into the Atlantic, aligned with the Pillars of Hercules. Their volcanic nature, with hot springs and frequent tremors, seems to echo Plato's descriptions of an island alive with resources and instability. Even today, the Azores feel like fragments of a larger whole, as if continents once stretched farther and the ocean swallowed the rest. The Canary Islands tell a similar story. Located closer to Africa, their cliffs of black lava and white beaches conceal a deep history. The indigenous Guanche people built step pyramids, mummified their dead, and told legends of ancestors who came from lands now lost beneath the sea. Some researchers believe their culture preserves an echo of survivors, descendants of people displaced by floods or catastrophes, who reached these islands as refuges. If Atlantis had scattered its people, might their memory linger here, carved into pyramids and rituals under the Atlantic sky? Still, geology tempers imagination. Modern surveys show no trace of a sunken continent in the Atlantic. Plate tectonics does not allow for such a landmass to vanish in the time Plato suggests. Yet islands do rise and fall with sea levels, and earthquakes can erase entire coastlines. The Spartel Bank could have been small compared to Plato's grand island, but for survivors who fled inland, its destruction might have grown in the telling, transformed into a legend of an empire drowned. Beyond these islands, stories persist of phantom lands glimpsed by sailors. Medieval maps mark Antillia, a mysterious island said to appear west of Portugal. Others speak of High Brazil, a phantom isle seen off Ireland's coast, appearing once every 7 years. While cartographic myths, they hint at a human longing to find what was lost, a cultural echo of Atlantis that shaped exploration itself. Columbus carried Donnelly's ideas and medieval tales with him, searching not only for Asia, but for lands whispered in legend. The Atlantic, then, becomes more than ocean. It is a canvas for memory. Its depths hold drowned river channels, submerged plains, and the ruins of Doggerland in the north. A reminder that vast lands once stood where waves now roll. Why not also a city, an island, a civilization? Picture it, standing at the edge of Gibraltar's cliffs at dusk. Behind you, the Mediterranean glows with the last traces of sun, warm and known. Before you, the Atlantic stretches vast and dark, its swells booming like drums against the rocks. Somewhere out there, perhaps beneath those waves, Spartel once rose, or the Azores once connected to something greater. The ocean hides well. Its silence is deeper than any desert's. Plato pointed beyond the straits for a reason. Perhaps he sought to place Atlantis in a realm his audience already considered mysterious, the perfect stage for allegory. Or perhaps his Egyptian sources carried memories of drowned islands far to the west. Memories distorted by time, yet rooted in truth. Whether allegory or record, the direction is the same. Outward, beyond the known, into the Atlantic. The Mediterranean gave us fragments, Santorini's eruption, Tartessos's wealth, Malta's temples, Helice's sudden drowning. But beyond the pillars, the possibilities widen. Islands sink, volcanoes erupt, coastlines vanish. Here, the legend breathes most fully, carried on the Atlantic winds that have always drawn explorers toward horizons unseen. And so the trail moves farther still, from cliffs and islands to deserts that once were seas, to landscapes whose very shapes seem to mirror Plato's words. For in the heart of Africa, the Sahara holds an eye wide enough to be seen from space, staring back as if guarding the memory of a lost world. From the vast expanse of the Atlantic, our path turns inward, into a desert so immense that it swallows memory itself. The Sahara stretches in waves of sand and stone, a sea without water, rippling across a continent. To those who cross it, the desert feels eternal, unchanging, and yet, hidden within this ocean of sand, lies something that arrests the imagination. A colossal spiral, a vast circle inscribed upon the earth. It is called the Rewrote structure, or more evocatively, the Eye of the Sahara. From space, it resembles an enormous bullseye, concentric rings carved into the desert floor, spanning nearly 50 kilometers across. Astronauts first noted its symmetry from orbit, puzzled by its clarity. Geologists later explained it as an eroded dome, a formation of quartzite and sandstone, worn down over millions of years. But for others, the resemblance is too uncanny to ignore. When Plato described Atlantis as a city built in rings of land and sea, 3 of water, 2 of earth, the eye seems to echo his words, like a forgotten diagram pressed into stone. To walk near it is to feel dwarfed. The outer ridges rise like ancient walls, circular plateaus, enclosing valleys that curve in perfect arcs. The desert wind scours rock faces until they gleam. And in the silence, it feels as though the structure is not geological but architectural. A ruin so vast it could only be seen from the sky. One could imagine ships gliding through channels where now there is only dust, markets and temples standing on ridges where only acacia trees now cling. The Sahara itself was not always barren. 10,000 years ago, during the African humid period, it was green, a land of lakes, rivers, and savannas. Rock art across Algeria and Libya depicts hippos, crocodiles, giraffes, and even boats. The desert we see today was once a cradle of life. Satellite scans reveal ancient river channels winding beneath the dunes, traces of waters long gone. Could the eye of the Sahara have once been ringed, not by sand, but by flowing water? If so, its resemblance to Plato's vision grows sharper still. Archaeology offers whispers. Near the Rewrote structure, stone tools, shards of pottery, and traces of hearths have been discovered, evidence that prehistoric peoples lived and hunted there. These finds date back thousands of years, aligning with the Sahara's greener ages, but none yet suggest a metropolis of canals and temples. The eye may have been known to nomads as a landmark, a place of gathering or ritual, but whether it was ever more than geology remains uncertain, and yet imagination lingers. Some theorists suggest the eye could once have been a coastal city before shifting climates and deserts consumed it. Others argue it may have stood near a vanished sea, its concentric ridges enclosing lagoons that slowly dried away. Plato's description of Atlantis's vast central plain, its mountains to the north, and rivers feeding fertile fields, these features, they argue, align with the Sahara's ancient geography. The resemblance may be coincidence, or it may be a distorted memory of a civilization erased not by sudden flood, but by creeping desertification. Legends lend further intrigue. West African oral traditions speak of kingdoms swallowed by sand, of empires that thrived when the Sahara was fertile. The Berber people tell stories of forgotten cities hidden beneath dunes, their walls entombed by centuries of shifting winds. Could the eye be one of these? Could its rings be the skeletal memory of a city that once ruled a fertile Sahara, a city whose story traveled north to Egypt, and from Egypt to Plato? Even if the eye is not Atlantis, it teaches us something about how landscapes become mirrors of myth. Human memory seeks patterns. It clings to shapes that resonate. A spiral in the desert becomes a drowned city reborn in stone. A green Sahara becomes a paradise lost. Plato's rings may have been inspired not by an island across the ocean, but by whispers of Africa, refracted through centuries of retelling. The Rewrote structure also reminds us of scale. Atlantis, as Plato described it, was immense. Its central plain, larger than many nations. Its city designed with almost impossible order. To imagine such grandeur, one must find a canvas large enough to contain it. The eye of the Sahara provides that canvas. Standing within it, gazing at ridges that arc away until they vanish beyond the horizon, one feels small enough to believe that giants once walked here, or that gods themselves inscribed their city upon the earth. But geology pushes back. The eye's rings, scientists insist, were formed by erosion, not architecture. The different layers of rock, some resistant, others softer, wore away at different rates, producing the circular pattern. Its age is measured not in thousands, but in hundreds of millions of years, long before humans existed. If this is true, then Atlantis did not fall here. The resemblance is illusion. Yet illusion itself carries power. For those seeking Atlantis, the eye remains one of the most compelling sights on Earth, a place where imagination and landscape entwine so closely that they cannot be pried apart. Picture it from above, the desert as an endless ocean of ochre, broken only by a vast spiral, a gaze turned skyward. To astronauts, it resembles an eye watching the heavens. To seekers of myth, it resembles a city long forgotten, its rings etched into eternity. To geologists, it is the patient work of erosion, sculpting stone into order by accident. Three truths, layered like strata, coexisting in silence. Whether Atlantis ever stood here or not, the eye reminds us of the fragility of memory and the seduction of pattern. Perhaps it is only rock, perhaps it is more, but it draws us inward, deeper into the labyrinth of the legend. And beyond the deserts of Africa, the whispers continue. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of Japan, lies another enigma. Stone steps and terraces submerged by the sea, a place some call the Atlantis of the East. The Pacific is an ocean of secrets, stretching wider than all the continents combined. It is a realm of trenches deeper than mountains are tall, of islands scattered like stepping stones across endless blue. For countless cultures, it has been both highway and grave, a place of journeys and of vanishings. And beneath its waves, divers have glimpsed shapes that suggest something uncanny, ruins where there should be only rock. The most famous of these lies off Yonaguni, a small island at the southern tip of Japan's Ryukyu chain. In 1985, a diver searching for hammerhead sharks came across a formation unlike anything he expected. Rising from the seabed at a depth of 25 meters was a series of stone terraces, their edges sharp and angular. Steps rose in regular patterns, broad platforms stretched out like plazas. Walls dropped in straight lines. The sea had hidden it, but the sea had also preserved it. To swim through Yonaguni's monument is to feel as though you are passing through the skeleton of a city. Geologist Masaki Kimura spent decades studying the site. He identified what he believed were roads, staircases, and even carvings of animals cut into the stone. He argued that when sea levels were lower, more than 10,000 years ago, Yonaguni's monument may have stood on dry land, a city drowned when the Ice Age ended. The timeline aligns with Plato's Atlantis, a civilization swallowed by rising seas. Could this be a parallel chapter of the same forgotten story? Critics argue otherwise. They point out that the rock is sandstone, prone to fracturing into neat geometric shapes under the force of tectonic stress. Earthquakes are common in the region, and over millennia, cracks and erosion could easily produce stair-like forms. To them, Yonaguni is nature's work, striking but not man-made. Yet the debate persists because of the human tendency to see meaning in order. Straight lines, right angles, platforms. They speak to us of architecture, of design, of intention. And whether carved by hand or not, Yonaguni inspires the same awe as a buried ruin. Legends of the Pacific add another layer. In Polynesian memory, there is Hawaii, an ancestral homeland now lost beneath the waves. In Micronesia, stories tell of islands that sank, their people scattering to new shores. In Hawaii, chants recall Kanaloa, the sea god whose drowned lands vanished beyond the horizon. And in the 19th century, Western explorers and writers began speaking of Mu, a vast Pacific continent said to have hosted a mother civilization before collapsing into the sea. Though geology denies the possibility of a lost continent, the myths themselves suggest something real was remembered: floods, migrations, and lands erased by rising oceans. Imagine the Pacific 10,000 years ago. Sea levels were more than 100 meters lower. Coastlines stretched far beyond their modern limits. Coral reefs stood dry. Many of the islands we know today were once larger, joined into single land masses. When the glaciers melted, whole worlds drowned. Villages, shrines, perhaps even cities built close to the sea would have been lost in silence. What Yonaguni shows us may be one of these drowned thresholds, a reminder that our maps today are not the same maps our ancestors knew. The scale of the Pacific amplifies the mystery. It is so vast, so little explored, that we cannot claim to know what lies beneath. Sonar has revealed seamounts, ridges, and plains, but only fragments have been investigated by divers. Who can say what other structures might wait in its depths? If even one site like Yonaguni suggests artificial shaping, the possibility of a forgotten maritime culture becomes harder to dismiss. And if such a culture once lived here, how might it connect to Atlantis? Perhaps not as the same civilization, but as a sibling, part of a network of peoples thriving on coasts during the Ice Age. Atlantis in the Atlantic, Mu in the Pacific, cultures that rose where land met sea and fell when sea swallowed their homes. The echoes are striking. Both described as advanced, both remembered in floods, both erased from history. To swim through Yonaguni is to step into this ambiguity. Sunlight filters down in shafts, illuminating steps worn smooth by waves. Fish drift through corridors that may be hallways or fractures. Your hand brushes stone that feels chiseled, though perhaps it is not. The mind wavers between certainty and doubt, and in that space, imagination thrives. It is a living metaphor for Atlantis itself, something half real, half legend, waiting in the deep. The Pacific holds more than geology. It holds memory. From the stories of Polynesian navigators to the chants of Hawaiian priests, from Japanese folklore of submerged palaces to the speculative maps of Mu, the theme is constant. The sea hides civilizations. Yonaguni is the place where these whispers converge, where stone itself seems to say that something was here before. Whether natural or human-made, the site changes how we see the past. It reminds us that rising seas are not just a modern threat. They have always reshaped human history. It challenges us to ask whether civilizations older than we imagine once flourished on coasts now drowned. And it keeps the question of Atlantis alive, not because it proves it, but because it shows that the sea is vast enough to hide truths we have yet to uncover. As we leave the Pacific's submerged terraces, the current carries us westward toward another ocean of mystery, the Caribbean, where blocks of stone beneath turquoise waters form a road that seems to lead nowhere. Another whisper of Atlantis, waiting to be heard. If these echoes of lost civilizations inspire you, consider subscribing and share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we'll keep listening to what the oceans still conceal. The Caribbean Sea, with its turquoise shallows and coral reefs glowing beneath sunlight, is a place that feels timeless. Yet beneath those inviting waters, divers have stumbled upon something that does not look like reef or rock. It looks like construction. It looks like a road. In 1968, two divers swimming off North Bimini Island in the Bahamas found themselves above rows of massive limestone blocks lying just 5 meters beneath the surface. Each block was rectangular, some more than 4 meters in length, and they were arranged in neat, continuous lines stretching for hundreds of meters. The formation became known as the Bimini Road, or the Bimini Wall, and ever since, it has been a lightning rod for speculation. Was it the foundation of a harbor, a wall built to guard against waves, a ceremonial causeway of a people whose memory is now erased? Or was it something far simpler, a trick of geology mistaken for design? The sight of the Bimini Road stirs the imagination. To float above it is to see what looks like paving stones joined at their edges, as if leading into the horizon. Some blocks rest atop others, stacked in ways that resemble the courses of a wall. Divers describe the uncanny feeling of swimming down a hallway, of moving across a plaza where light and shadow turn stone into architecture. It is as if the seafloor itself has become a ruin. Scientists have studied the stones closely. Their verdict leans toward the natural. A Bimini Road, they argue, is beach rock, a form of limestone that forms along ancient coastlines when sand, shells, and coral fragments cement together. Over thousands of years, the slabs fracture into rectangular shapes, breaking along straight lines. Storms and currents then scatter and reposition them into formations that appear deliberate. According to geologists, what looks like engineering is simply the handiwork of waves and time. But the debate does not end there. Those who have dived repeatedly at Bimini point out stones arranged in tight curves, blocks placed on top of one another, or shapes that seem too precise for accident. Some argue the road could be both, a natural foundation later altered by human hands. After all, throughout history, people have used natural rock formations as the basis for harbors, quarries, or sacred spaces. Could the Bimini Road be a hybrid, nature's gift refined into civilization's design? Into this uncertainty steps myth. Decades before the discovery, American mystic Edgar Cayce made a startling prediction. In the 1930s, he spoke of Atlantis, saying that parts of it would rise again near Bimini in the late 1960s. When divers found the road in 1968, his followers saw it as prophecy fulfilled. To them, the Bimini Road was not only evidence of Atlantis, but a sign that the world was entering a new age of remembering, when forgotten truths would resurface. Local legends add fuel. Across the Caribbean, stories of lost lands abound. The Lucayan people, once native to the Bahamas, spoke of spirits of the sea and mysterious beings who dwelt beneath the waves. Farther south, the Taino told of floods that reshaped islands, of ancestral homelands claimed by water. On the African coast, across the Atlantic, myths speak of kingdoms drowned by waves, their survivors scattered. Enslaved peoples brought to the Caribbean carried fragments of those stories with them. The result is a tapestry of memory woven from two continents, all pointing toward the idea of land lost to the sea. The Caribbean itself is a place shaped by change. During the Ice Age, sea levels were far lower. Many of today's islands were once part of larger landmasses, their coastlines extending far beyond where the waves now break. As the ice melted, rising waters carved the Caribbean into the archipelago we know today. Entire shorelines, settlements, and sacred places would have been drowned in the process. The Bimini Road may simply be a survivor of that transformation, a structure, natural or man-made, now frozen beneath clear water. The mystery of the road is not only in its stones, but in what it symbolizes. To believers, it is a dateway, proof that Atlantis once stood in the western seas. To skeptics, it is a cautionary tale of how easily our minds impose pattern on chaos. To both, it is an enigma that keeps alive the possibility that history holds more than we yet know. Imagine swimming along its length. The water is warm. Sunlight bends into shafts that dance across the limestone. Fish dart between the cracks. The blocks stretch on, guiding your gaze outward until they fade into sand and seagrass. The road seems to lead somewhere, though nowhere is visible. It becomes a metaphor, an unfinished sentence in stone, urging you to follow. The Caribbean offers other puzzles too. Off Cuba's coast in the early 2000s, sonar scans revealed structures 2,000 feet beneath the surface, shapes resembling pyramids, streets, and buildings. Some scientists dismiss them as sonar illusions, others as geological formations. But the possibility lingers. If sea levels rose more than 100 meters at the end of the Ice Age, entire cities could indeed lie beneath these waters. The Bimini Road, then, would not be unique, but part of a wider story of drowned worlds. Whether natural or built, the road resonates because it reflects Atlantis's essence, a place both real and unreal, half in myth, half in geology. It invites us to wonder whether Plato's tale was not fantasy, but memory. A memory of coasts lost to rising seas, of cultures swept away, of survivors whose stories became legend. Standing on Bimini's beaches today, you can see where turquoise shallows turn to deep blue. Somewhere beneath those shifting colors lies the road, waiting in silence. To the eye, it is stone. But to the imagination, it is a bridge, not only to Atlantis, but to the possibility that human history is far older, far stranger than we are taught. From this road of mystery, the story of Atlantis leads us not only across oceans, but into the heart of its supposed genius. For Atlantis was remembered not simply as a city of rings and canals, but as a civilization of mastery, masters of water, of metal, of fleets. If we are to understand its legend, we must look at the technologies that made it shine. To imagine Atlantis, we must not only picture its shining walls and circular canals, but ask what sort of science and technology could sustain such a city. Plato describes not a primitive settlement, but a super-civilization, an empire with mastery over water, metals, architecture, fleets, and agriculture, on a scale his audience could scarcely comprehend. The details suggest more than a myth. They suggest an organized society of engineers, architects, and metallurgists far ahead of their time. At the heart of Atlantis was water. Plato emphasizes canals so wide and deep that ships could pass in rows, connected to the sea by passageways cut through stone. Bridges arched over them, wide enough for chariots, while tunnels beneath allowed vessels to slip silently through. The precision of this vision feels modern, closer to Renaissance city planning than Bronze Age improvisation. Water was channeled for defense, for transport, and for irrigation, turning the city into a living organism whose veins were canals. History offers echoes. In the Indus Valley, more than 4,000 years ago, Mohenjo-Daro's engineers built covered drains and reservoirs, laying out their streets in grids. In Mesopotamia, complex canal systems turned deserts into farmland, sustaining cities like Ur and Lagash. In Angkor, Cambodia, vast barays, artificial reservoirs, were dug to harness monsoon waters. Atlantis, as Plato described it, magnified all these feats into a single system where every ring of stone and water served both utility and beauty. It suggests a culture not only of survival, but of mastery. The Atlanteans were said to command metals unknown to ordinary peoples. Orichalcum, second only to gold in value, covered their walls and temples, glowing red in sunlight. For centuries, scholars debated whether this was pure invention. Then, in 2015, divers off Sicily discovered ingots of a copper-zinc alloy resembling brass, tested and identified as orichalcum. If Plato drew from memory of real alloys, Atlantis may have been a metallurgical pioneer. Imagine walls lined with reflective alloys, shimmering like fire across harbors. Such architecture would not only display wealth, but inspire awe, power made visible. The range of metals described, gold, silver, brass, tin, suggests vast trade networks or mines of extraordinary richness. A super-civilization would need both supply and skill, miners, smelters, smiths. Their tools, their weapons, their ships, all would gleam with the products of this industry. Compare this to the Antikythera mechanism recovered from a Greek shipwreck, a bronze device capable of predicting eclipses and planetary motions. It reminds us how advanced knowledge can appear suddenly, only to vanish for centuries. Atlantis, if it existed, may have produced wonders that dissolved into silence when its city fell. Agriculture, too, was said to flourish beyond imagination. Plato describes a central plain 370 by 550 kilometers, irrigated by canals that divided fields into perfect plots. Crops grew abundantly. Harvests were bountiful. This image recalls the Nile Delta, where annual floods left fertile soil, or the steppes terraces of the Andes, where mountain slopes became gardens. But Atlantis's plain, with its geometric canals, implies something greater: planned agriculture, optimized on a continental scale. It suggests knowledge of hydrology, soil, and seasons beyond what we typically credit to antiquity. Even fleets and armies reveal science. Plato claims Atlantis could muster thousands of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers. To sustain such forces requires logistics, storehouses for grain, shipyards for construction, stables for horses. It implies advanced administration, counting, and law. Sumer gave us cuneiform to track trade. The Inca used quipus of knotted cords. What might the Atlanteans have used to manage such scale? Were their written records lost with their fall? Or were their methods so integrated into architecture and ritual that they left no portable trace? Speculative writers push further. Some imagine Atlantis harnessed natural energy, crystals channeling solar power, or magnetic fields tapped for propulsion. Edgar Cayce spoke of fire crystals that powered airships and machines, until their misuse shattered the land. While no evidence supports such claims, the myths themselves matter, for they reflect how people perceive Atlantis. Not only as a city of stone, but as a place where science verged on magic. In mythic terms, science becomes indistinguishable from divine gift. The parallels are striking when we consider sudden gaps in history. How did Göbekli Tepe's builders, 12,000 years ago, carve massive pillars with intricate animals centuries before cities or farms? How did the Maya align their pyramids with solstices, or the builders of Stonehenge predict eclipses? Each site suggests knowledge concentrated and then lost. Atlantis could be the missing context, the civilization whose science seeded fragments across the world. Picture the city at its height. Canals gleam like mirrors, lined with ships painted in vivid colors. Workshops ring with the sound of hammers striking orichalcum. Fields stretch in ordered rows, canals glinting like silver threads. Temples rise in spirals of gold and stone, while priests chant in acoustics designed to carry sound like thunder. The city is not chaotic. It is orchestration, science woven into ritual, geometry embodied in stone. And yet such brilliance carries peril. The very systems that made Atlantis powerful, its canals, its fleets, its centralized wealth, also made it vulnerable. A quake could rupture harbors. A flood could drown fields. The loss of a few centers of knowledge could unravel generations of skill. Just as the Antikythera mechanism vanished from history for nearly 2 millennia, so too might Atlantean science have been lost in a single night, leaving only whispers to inspire Plato's tale. Atlantis, then, becomes less a fable and more a reminder. Civilizations can reach heights of knowledge, but unless that knowledge is dispersed, it can be undone. Its loss is not proof it never existed. It is proof of how fragile brilliance can be. The science of Atlantis lingers in imagination because it feels like a mirror. We see in it our own achievements, our dams, our alloys, our networks, and we wonder how secure they really are. Could they too be swept away by water or fire? Could our own science become the orichalcum of a future myth? The image persists, canals flowing like veins, walls gleaming with fire-colored metals, temples resonating with song. Whether allegory or memory, it is a vision of civilization at its most advanced, and at its most fragile. And beyond science lies myth once more. For Plato insisted the Atlanteans were not merely engineers, but descendants of Poseidon, touched by the divine. To understand Atlantis fully, we must step from metallurgy and hydrology into mythic bloodlines, where gods and mortals walk together. In Plato's story, Atlantis was not just a kingdom of regular people. It was created when gods and humans came together. Poseidon, the god of the sea, fell in love with a human woman named Cleito. Together they had 10 sons. These sons became kings. Each one ruled a part of the island, and they all followed the oldest son, Atlas. Because of this family tree, the Atlanteans believed they came not just from regular human families, but from a god whose powerful weapon controlled the ocean itself. Old stories often hide real memories. All around the world, different cultures have told stories about beings who came down from the sky or rose up from the water, bringing knowledge and rules. The Sumerians told stories about the Apkallu, 7 wise teachers sent by the god Enki. They came out of the sea to help humanity. The Dogon people of Mali tell stories about the Nomo, fish-like beings from the Sirius star system who came down to teach people about order. The Hopi remember the ant people who protected humans during terrible floods and fires. Each story shares the same idea. Civilization did not start by itself. It was given or shared by beings that were more than human. Could Atlantis be another part of this pattern? If Poseidon was not just a god of ocean waves, but represented some advanced culture or even visitors from somewhere else, then the Atlantean kings inherited a special gift that mixed earthly life with something from another world. Their harmony, their fairness, their temples covered in unknown metals, could all be signs of a society standing between myth and science. But being connected to gods has 2 sides. For many years, Plato tells us, the Atlanteans followed the sacred laws. They gathered every few years to make promises again in Poseidon's temple, sacrificing bulls and swearing to be fair. But as time passed, their divine blood got weaker, mixed with more human marriages. Good behavior gave way to greed. Wanting more overpowered wisdom, they turned outward trying to control other lands, and in this pride they betrayed their divine gift. The gods, Plato said, would not forgive such arrogance, and so came the punishment: earthquakes, floods, and one single night that erased Atlantis. We see the same idea in other places. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods send a flood to wash away human wrongdoing. In Greek myth, Zeus sends a flood to wipe out proud humans, saving only Deucalion and Pyrrha. In Hindu tradition, Vishnu warns Manu about rising waters, guiding him to safety. Again and again, humanity is lifted up by divine help and punished when it goes the wrong way. Atlantis fits perfectly into this pattern. A civilization too close to the gods, destroyed by forgetting them. What if the myth is less about punishment and more about memory? Maybe these stories hide real disasters, floods at the end of the Ice Age, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis that survivors explained using gods. To say Poseidon punished us is to wrap chaos in meaning. To say the gods left is to explain the sudden loss of knowledge. The Atlanteans might have seemed like gods themselves, masters of water and metal, until their city fell and their light went out. Whether Poseidon was myth, symbol, or something more, the image of coming from gods makes Atlantis more than a lost city. It becomes a reminder that human greatness often feels borrowed, as if whispered by something beyond us. And those whispers do not end with Atlantis. Flood stories passed across cultures and continents speak of worlds drowned, of angry gods, of civilizations starting over. To follow the divine thread of Atlantis is to follow a flood of myths, each carrying pieces of the same forgotten memory. Everywhere we look, the waters rise, not just in seas and rivers, but in stories carved into human memory. Plato's Atlantis drowned in a single day and night, but the echo of that drowning can be heard in countless cultures, scattered like shells on distant shores. If Atlantis was real, perhaps it is saved less in stone and more in these repeating myths of floods that washed away entire worlds. Take the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in Mesopotamia more than 4,000 years ago. In its lines is the tale of Utnapishtim, who built a great boat to survive a divine flood. His story is similar to Noah in the book of Genesis, who rode out the flood with his family and animals. Both stories have strange similarities, Warnings from the gods, a survival boat, and humanity starting again after waters go down. Are these coincidences or ripples of a much older event remembered across civilizations? In India, the Satapatha Brahmana tells how Manu was warned by a fish, a form of Vishnu, that a flood would sweep away the world. Manu built a boat, tied it to the fish's horn, and was guided to safety until the waters fell. The Hopi people of North America speak of being saved by the ant people, who sheltered them underground until the floods went away. In Mesoamerica, Aztec myths recall suns that ended in floods, each world cycle destroyed to make way for another. These are not separate tales. They are a chorus. They suggest that humanity remembers in its bones a disaster of water. Could the end of the Ice Age, with glaciers melting and seas rising over 100 meters, be where it started? Entire coastlines where early people likely lived would have drowned. Villages, temples, ports, all gone beneath waves. Survivors might have carried stories inland, explaining the destruction as divine punishment or cosmic renewal. Atlantis, in this reading, is simply the Greek version of a universal trauma. And yet, Atlantis stands apart because it is not just about survival. It is about a civilization, a super-civilization destroyed. Plato gives us not only flood but grandeur, canals, fleets, metals, laws, and divine family lines. If Atlantis reflects the same floods remembered elsewhere, then perhaps the Greeks saved more detail about what was lost. Not just a world drowned, but a city erased, knowledge undone. The pattern of the flood is also the pattern of starting over. Each culture speaks of rebirth after water. Gilgamesh returns to seek wisdom. Noah's descendants fill the earth again. Manu's children become the new humanity. Atlantis, too, leaves us with the possibility that survivors scattered, planting pieces of their knowledge into other lands. The flood does not only end, it also begins. So we return to the question, were these floods metaphors for the collapse of good behavior, or records of real disasters? Perhaps both. Myths wrap memory in meaning, saving events in symbols. Water cleanses, but it also erases. What it leaves behind is a story, fragile and glowing, telling us of worlds before ours. And if survivors walked away from Atlantis, if they carried pieces of that drowned knowledge, then where did they go? The answer may lie in the sudden appearance of advanced skills in places far from Greece, in temples that seem to appear fully formed, in cities that show up without slow growth, survivors perhaps hiding in plain sight. When a great city falls, not everyone dies with it. Survivors scatter, carrying pieces of memory, pieces of skill. If Atlantis truly sank, then its legacy may not lie beneath waves alone, but in the sudden leaps of culture that appear in distant lands, as though knowledge had been transplanted rather than born. Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, 12,000 years old. It appeared at the dawn of settled life, when humans were thought to be just hunter-gatherers. Yet here stand massive T-shaped pillars carved with decaled animal designs, arranged in circles that suggest ceremonial purpose. The site is older than Stonehenge by thousands of years, older than the pyramids. How did people with no cities, no farms, no wheels carve and line up megaliths of such size? Some suggest they were guided, perhaps by remains of a lost culture who remembered what complex building looked like. Survivors teaching scattered tribes to raise stone as they once had in their drowned home. In the Andes, the god Viracocha appears in myth as a bearded figure who came after a flood, teaching humanity farming, building, and order before disappearing across the sea. The Inca honored him as the bringer of civilization. At sites like Tiwanaku and Pumapunku near Lake Titicaca, huge stones fitted with laser-like precision whisper of techniques still debated today. Could Viracocha be an echo of Atlantean survivors remembered as gods by those who received their teachings? Across the Atlantic, in Mesoamerica, the Olmec culture appeared suddenly around 1200 BCE. Their giant basalt heads, carved with unfamiliar features, hint at influences not easily explained by local development alone. They built ceremonial centers, practiced advanced astronomy, and set up trade networks across distances challenging for their time. Some fringe theories suggest a transoceanic spark, perhaps the shadow of a drowned culture whose sailors reached distant shores. Even Egypt bears traces. The ancient historian Manetho spoke of a pre-dynastic age ruled by divine kings before the pharaohs. The sudden rise of writing, architecture, and huge construction along the Nile suggests less of a slow climb and more of a leap. Was this the work of native genius? Or did the Nile inherit wisdom carried from elsewhere? Wisdom drowned in one land, reborn in another. Genetics adds another thread. Studies of ancient DNA reveal ghost populations, peoples whose traces remain in our genes, but whose cultures are unknown. They suggest migrations, encounters, and disappearances we have yet to map. Could some of these genetic shadows be remains of displaced survivors, absorbed into new tribes, their identities forgotten while their influence lived on? To imagine Atlanteans scattered is to imagine seeds thrown by a storm. Each seed took root in different soil: Anatolia, the Andes, the Americas, the Nile. They took root as sudden complexity, as myths of gods, as unexplainable leaps. If so, then history as we know it is less a straight line than a mosaic of gifts, many of them disguised. The question lingers: if survivors carried pieces, how much did they lose, and how much did they choose to hide? Perhaps their silence was protective, keeping dangerous knowledge from coming back. Or perhaps what they carried was enough: symbols, skills, whispers that later blossomed into civilizations we still admire. And if survivors could plant new beginnings, then perhaps Atlantis itself is not unique. History holds many cities thought lost to myth, only to be dug up in dust and stone. To understand Atlantis, we must place it beside those vanished yet proven cities: Pompeii, Angkor, Petra, real cities that remind us how easily greatness can fall. Atlantis may escape us, but history has shown that cities once thought imaginary can be found beneath ash, vines, or sand. These rediscoveries remind us that myth and reality often blur, and that even the grandest empires can be undone in a heartbeat. Take Pompeii. On a summer day in 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted with a fury that turned the sky black. Ash and pumice rained down, roofs collapsed, and pyroclastic surges swept through streets. Thousands died in moments. Yet in that destruction lay preservation. Loaves of bread still in ovens, frescoes still on walls, and bodies preserved in plaster, their final gestures frozen. For centuries, Pompeii lay forgotten until excavations uncovered a time capsule of Roman life. It shows us what Plato hinted at with Atlantis: how quickly a city can vanish, leaving behind only silence until earth and fire give it up again. Move eastward to Cambodia, where Angkor once stood as the beating heart of the Khmer Empire. In the 12th century, its population may have reached 1 million, making it one of the largest cities on Earth. At its center rose Angkor Wat, a temple complex aligned with the cosmos, its towers symbolizing Mount Meru. But by the 15th century, Angkor fell silent. Droughts and floods broke down its complex water system, while invasions and shifting trade routes sealed its decline. When French explorers stumbled upon Angkor in the 19th century, they found huge temples swallowed by jungle, roots of strangler figs twisted with stone. Like Atlantis, Angkor was once vibrant, then consumed, hidden, until rediscovery. And then Petra, the rose-red city of the Nabateans, carved into desert cliffs of Jordan. It thrived as a center of trade between Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Its facades shimmer in the sun. Rock-cut theaters and temples, revealing artistry carved directly from sandstone. Yet shifting trade routes and earthquakes brought decline. By the Middle Ages, Petra was abandoned, its splendor remembered only in whispers until European travelers rediscovered it. The desert had preserved a ghost city, much as the sea might preserve Atlantis. Each of these places teaches a lesson.
Disappearance does not always mean fiction.
Pompeii shows how disaster can bury a city in hours. Angkor reveals how environmental changes can unravel even the most complex systems. Petra proves that deserts can guard secrets for centuries. In their falls, we see reflections of Atlantis, not as allegory, but as possibility. What connects them all is the rhythm of pride and fragility. Cities rise with ambition, engineer wonders, and then fall to fire, to drought, to shifting sands.
The silence that follows is so complete that centuries later, their existence seems unlikely.
And yet, they return to us through excavation. Each rediscovery erasing the line between legend and reality. So, when doubters dismiss Atlantis as just a story, these cities whisper otherwise, that what is buried may yet rise, that what is thought impossible may one day be dug up. And Atlantis is not alone in this in-between space.
Other cities once thought myth.
Troy, Mycenae, Babylon were also dismissed until stone proved otherwise. It is to those legendary rediscoveries we now turn, for they remind us that even Homer's poetry hid real walls, real gates, and real treasures. And if Troy could rise from verse, could Atlantis not also rise from dialogue?
For centuries, Troy lived only in poetry.
Homer's Iliad told of walls that could not fall, of heroes who fought and gods who interfered. Scholars called it legend, a tale made for song. Yet in the 19th century, Heinrich Schliemann dug into a hill in northwest Turkey and uncovered layers of city upon city. There were walls, towers, and gates, real stone, not metaphor. One layer, Troy 7, showed signs of fire and conflict, dated near 1200 BCE. The myth had roots.
What was once dismissed as fiction became history written in soil.
Troy proved that epic memory could save a real place for thousands of years, waiting to be dug up. Mycenae, too, was long remembered only as the kingdom of Agamemnon, Homer's leader of men. Its lion gate, its golden mask, its cyclopean walls were thought to be poetic exaggerations. But when Schliemann turned his shovel there as well, he found tombs filled with treasures, weapons, and gold masks.
The mask of Agamemnon, whether it belonged to him or not, showed that a warrior elite once ruled in splendor. The stones of Mycenae still stand, massive blocks locked together, just as Homer's verses described. Then Babylon, a city of both history and myth, remembered in the Bible as the home of the Tower of Babel, and in Greek accounts as a place of wonders. Some doubted the scale of its splendor, but excavations in the early 20th century uncovered the Ishtar Gate with its glazed blue bricks and reliefs of dragons and lions. Ziggurats rose as stairways to heaven, echoing the tower remembered in Genesis. Babylon's laws, its art, its gardens all confirmed a city that once matched its myths in grandeur. What unites these rediscoveries is the way myth folded history within itself, wrapping real places in song and symbol until time blurred them into legend. For centuries, Troy, Mycenae, and Babylon seemed as unreachable as Atlantis. Then shovels struck stone, and our silence was broken. So why not Atlantis? If Homer's Troy could come from epic poetry, why could Plato's Atlantis not come from philosophical dialogue? Doubters say no evidence exists, but the same was once said of these cities, until ruins proved otherwise. The line between myth and history is not fixed. It shifts as we uncover what time has hidden. Each rediscovered city also carried a lesson. Troy showed how pride and war can erase kingdoms. Mycenae revealed the weakness of empires, rich in gold but open to collapse. Babylon warned of ambition that reached too high. And Atlantis, though still unseen, represents the same rhythm: greatness undone, memory saved in stories, waiting to resurface. The rediscovery of mythic cities gives Atlantis believability not through proof, but through precedent. It reminds us that legends can save truth, however twisted, and if that is so, then perhaps the absence of Atlantis is less about invention and more about how well the sea can hide. But what if the absence is not natural? What if Atlantis vanished not because of just floods or earthquakes, but because its knowledge touched powers too great to survive? Some believe its brilliance hints at something beyond human, cosmic connections, alien mentors, and technologies forgotten. There are moments in Plato's tale that feel too bright for their time. A temple shimmering with metals more radiant than gold. A fleet of ships counted in the thousands, as though Atlantis commanded the oceans of the world. Canals carved with such precision that they seemed drawn by engineers with instruments we only rediscovered thousands of years later. To some, these are signs not of allegory, but of knowledge borrowed from elsewhere. Knowledge so advanced it appears almost alien. The 20th century gave new voice to this idea. Writers like Ignatius Donnelly had already imagined Atlantis as the mother civilization of all later cultures. But Erich von Däniken pushed further in Chariots of the Gods, suggesting ancient builders across the world were guided by visitors from the stars. If the Nazca lines in Peru could be seen only from the air, if the stones of Pumapunku in Bolivia fit with laser-like accuracy, if the Great Pyramid aligned with Orion's belt, then perhaps Atlantis was the hub of this cosmic network, the place where the gods once walked openly among humans. Orichalcum itself invites wonder. Was it truly a copper-zinc alloy, or something stranger? An unknown conductor, a crystalline metal capable of storing energy. Fringe theorists describe Atlantean power crystals said to capture solar or cosmic rays, channeling light into limitless force. Edgar Cayce, the American mystic, spoke of fire crystals that powered flying machines before their misuse shattered the island. Such stories may sound like fantasy, yet they match the repeating pattern of civilizations undone by their own brilliance. Maps and artifacts deepen the mystery. The Piri-Reis map of 1513 appears to show parts of South America and even an ice-free Antarctica, long before modern surveys. Some claim such charts come from Atlantean mapmakers, their knowledge saved in pieces. And the Antikythera mechanism, pulled from a Greek shipwreck, proves that advanced mechanics, planetary calculators in bronze, existed 2,000 years ago, only to vanish for centuries. Could Atlantis have held even greater technologies, lost more completely? Myths lend fuel. The Sumerian gods, the Apkallu, came from the sea to teach. The Hopi remembered star beings. The Dogon of Africa spoke of Sirius, a star system they described with accuracy long before telescopes. Each of these whispers suggests contact, guidance, or inheritance from beyond. In that context, Atlantis becomes not only a lost city, but a cosmic portal, the place where humanity touched something larger, something otherworldly. But if such connections existed, why erase them? Some suggest Atlantis fell because it misused its knowledge. Like Icarus, it flew too close to the sun, and the gods, or perhaps its own technology, brought it down. Others imagine deliberate action, an external force wiping the slate clean, removing traces too dangerous to remain. Even if we dismiss alien influence, the idea itself is revealing. Atlantis lives on as a canvas for our fears and our hopes, of knowledge too powerful, of visitors too strange, of destinies too fragile. Whether cosmic or human, the message is the same.
Greatness carries danger, and silence may follow quickly after glory. And so we return to the sea's long hush. For if Atlantis was erased, whether by gods, quakes, or something unearthly, its silence still speaks.
To hear it, we must look not only to myths and theories, but to ourselves, to what Atlantis means as a mirror of ambition, of loss, of longing. Night settles on the sea, and the horizon becomes a line of shadow. Somewhere beyond it, in the depths we have not yet mapped, lies the idea of Atlantis, whether as stone or memory, or nothing more than dream. We began with Plato's whisper of a golden empire, swallowed in a single night, and followed its trail across oceans, deserts, myths, and ruins. Each path offered fragments, rings of stone in the Sahara, terraces beneath Pacific waves, roads lost in Caribbean shallows, cities rediscovered after centuries of silence. None gave certainty, all gave wonder. Atlantis lives on not because we can prove it, but because it holds a mirror to ourselves. It is the symbol of a civilization too advanced, too ambitious, too close to the gods or the stars. Its destruction reminds us of fragility, how even the brightest flame can be put out by water, fire, or time. Its survivors, if they lived, may have planted knowledge in Göbekli Tepe, in the Andes, in the Nile Valley, leaving clues hidden in myths of gods and floods. Whether true or not, the pattern stays like a folded page of history waiting to be reopened. Modern science searches with sonar, satellites, and submersibles. Geologists map drowned coastlines. Archaeologists uncover forgotten cities like the Upano Valley in Ecuador, revealing that lost civilizations are not just fantasy. Each discovery makes Atlantis feel less impossible, more like a metaphor we may one day unmask. And yet perhaps its greatest power is to remain hidden, to exist as a question rather than an answer. The pattern of silence returns. Silence after Pompeii's eruption. Silence in Angkor's abandoned temples. Silence beneath Petra's rose-red cliffs. Silence in the oceanic abyss, where Plato's words still echo. This silence is not emptiness. It is potential, an invitation to imagine what we have forgotten and what we may still uncover. As you listen, picture Atlantis not only as a city of gold and canals, but as a portal into the unknown within history itself, into the places where time folds and memory blurs. Atlantis is both warning and promise, that we are capable of brilliance and also of erasure. Where are you listening from tonight, and at what time? Perhaps you too carry pieces of this myth into your own silence. If you find these stories interesting, consider subscribing and let us continue this journey together. For though we close this tale, the mystery is never truly ended. Atlantis lingers just beyond the horizon, whispering from the depths.